Embark on a journey to the heart of an isolated and restrictive island where secrets simmer beneath the surface. In Brandon Andrus's What Can't Be Hidden, follow Thura as she uncovers the dark truths of Patrida, navigating through betrayal and redemption. This tale of courage, love, and the quest for freedom will captivate you from the very first page. Get What Can't Be Hidden, available now from Choir Publishing.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Nat. I'm with my brother John and our good buddy, the lovely, the talented, the estimable Bethany Shea. Say hi, you guys. What's up?
Hi, you guys. What's up?
Hey. I'm recording from a Starbucks right now, so there are people all around me. So there's a lot of noise. So just we'll allow it to be what it is. But
yes, sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. How was that for the most non-committal thing you've ever heard in your life? Sometimes you, in a very sort of anyway. I'm going to stop. I don't promise that I won't start up again. But this is, by the way, the podcast that we call This Is Not Church, because if it was church, you would have left by now. And at least John and I would join you in your leaving. But we are here today, as we always are, with an amazing guest. And I'm going to give you a quick rundown. Our guest today is John Philip Newell. He is a Celtic teacher and author of spirituality who calls the modern world to reawaken to the sacredness of earth and every human being. Canadian by birth and a citizen also of Scotland, he resides with his family in Edinburgh and works on both sides of the Atlantic. In 2016, he began the Earth and Soul Initiative and teaches regularly in the United States and Canada, as well as leading international pilgrimage weeks on Iona in the Western Isles of Scotland. His PhD is from the University of Edinburgh, and he has authored over 15 books, including his award-winning publication, Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul, which was the 2022 gold winner of the Nautilus Book Award for Spirituality and Religious Thought of the West. His new book, which came out August 2024, also with Harper One, is The Great Search, in which he looks at the great spiritual yearnings of humanity today in the context of the decline of religion as we have known it. Amen. That's a whole lot of information, but we are so glad that you're with us. Welcome to the podcast. John, how are you, sir?
I'm well, Nat. Good to be with you all.
Good deal. Well, hey, if you wouldn't mind, like we said before we started recording, our typical sort of jumping off question is just to maybe ask people to share a little bit of their spiritual journey, maybe a little bit of their background as far as maybe church and stuff goes. And as much or as little as you feel comfortable sharing would be great, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I was born in Canada. My father was Irish and my mother was Scottish, but I and my three sisters were born in Canada. So although most of my life has been in Scotland, I feel pretty comfortable on both sides of the Atlantic and have a mixed up sort of mid-Atlantic accent. But I was reared in a very conservative evangelical family and tradition. And that was never how I defined my own theology or belief system. But looking back on it, I continue to be grateful for what I think is the best side of the evangelical tradition. And that is, I think I was trained to pay attention to the heart. So now, when I find myself working in interspiritual, interfaith contexts or being in dialogue and relationship with those who don't claim to have any particular religious affiliation, I realize that what I'm usually doing, certainly at the beginning of a conversation and dialogue, I find myself paying attention to the heart. I mean, I'm very interested in the mind and ideas, but I think that's part of what I bring with me from my evangelical background. So I have a type of gratitude for that loving family and what, in my experience, was a loving tradition. But it never gave me language for my yearning to be in contact with nature and the natural world. There was no language to describe the encounter of the natural world as sacred or to deeply include it in my spirituality. And a turning point for me came when I was in Edinburgh as a student, and I heard publicly speaking George MacLeod, who was the founder of the modern day Iona community. And for the first time in my life, I heard a Christian teacher teaching the sacredness of earth and teaching the way of nonviolence as essential to the way of true relationship, and not only individually but collectively. And I had an experience that night hearing him of sort of coming home. It wasn't that I yet even knew what home was deep in my soul, but hearing him got me in touch with something deep within me about a desire to be in true relationship with earth and a desire to follow the way of nonviolence. And I was early 20s, he was early 80s, and already a legend of a man in Scotland. And I had no idea how this was going to happen, but I thought I need somehow to come close to this man and to learn more from him. And a few weeks later, the universe provided me with the context. I was on the island of Iona with my wife, Ali, and we were walking along the shore, one of the shore pathways, and we bumped into the great man. And he invited me back for a whiskey. And I'm not sure that I had ever had whiskey at that point, but and certainly not before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But when the great man asks you back for whiskey, you go back for whiskey. And that was a really important conversation, and talking about how we care for Earth, how we allow Earth to do its healing, and speaking about the commitment to non-violence, and especially disarmament, nuclear disarmament in the British context. And I remember at the end of that conversation, he said to me, Newell, what are we going to do about all this? And two words sort of strike me in that question. One was the word we. I think this was part of his gift and part of his realization that the way of real transformation is not just about what am I going to do, but what are we going to do, and the importance of sharing vision together and working together for real change. And then the other word was do. What are we going to do about this? Not just what are we going to think about this, but what are we going to write about this? What are we going to act about this? What are we going to embody about this? So that was a really important moment in my life. And then I was able to come very close to George MacLeod for the last 15 years of his life. And in the midst of all of that, I chose to study theology in Edinburgh, and then was ordained as a Church of Scotland minister. And I mean, the Scottish tradition, of course, has been historically very influenced by Calvinism. And so there was a lot in that way of seeing that didn't particularly sit with George MacLeod's vision of sacredness of earth and the sacredness of every human being and the way of nonviolence. But that was the church of the nation that I was identified with and chose to train with, and did various things as an ordained minister, some university chaplaincy work, which was great. Getting to combine the academic world with the pastoral world and a sense of forming community in the university context. And then I eventually became the leader of the Abbey community on Iona. And that was a really important time. That was when I came into deeper contact with this sort of lineage of Celtic wisdom that stretches right over the centuries, from as early as the 2nd century right through to today. And a tradition of wisdom that really deeply honors Earth and that looks for divine presence at the heart of every human being, every life form. And then a couple of years ago, on Iona, during one of our pilgrimage weeks, I had my I call him my rabbi. I mean, he is the rabbi to many people, but he's like a brother to me. And I had been saying to him for many years, come to Iona, you must come to Iona. And he kept saying, well, yeah, that would be great, but nothing was happening about it. So in a number of years ago, I decided to create an award for him, honoring him as a teacher who has deeply influenced me. And the gift and the award was a week on Iona. So he was there with his wife, and I was so pleased to share that island with him. But the first day of the pilgrimage week was a Sunday, first full day, and I invited them to the Abbey for the morning service of communion. And in his presence, sort of sitting beside him, his presence enabled me to hear some things being said, even in that fairly liberal place of Christian belief and commitment to justice and action. Things were being said that I realized were an offense to people of other great spiritual traditions, and I felt was an offense to my rabbi brother. And I have never come so close to standing up halfway through a service and saying stop, saying to the preacher, stop, you're offending my brother. And thank God I did not do that. I don't think that would have been the right way forward, especially as a former leader of the Abbey community. But at the end of the service, I felt I needed somehow to comfort my brother and sister, my Jewish brother and sister. And not quite knowing what to do, I invited them out into the cloister of the Abbey, and at the heart of the cloister, there's a magnificent piece of art by the Jewish artist Jacques Lipschitz. And I think something intuitively in me wanted to go there and to stand before the Lipschitz sculpture. And I was feeling I needed somehow to comfort them, but when I opened my mouth, I began to weep. And all I could say was, I'm so ashamed. I'm ashamed of the exclusivist language, the superiority attitude in Christianity to other great traditions. And so I thought I was there to comfort them, but I began to weep and they comforted me. They took me in their arms and I wept. And in that moment, I realized I needed to relinquish my ordination. And so that was the beginning of an important turning point in my life. And I chose not to act on that decision for a full year, to give myself time to not that I doubted the decision, but I wanted, when I acted finally, to not speak in anger, not primarily anger, but to speak from a place of deep peace within myself. So about a year later, I relinquished my ordination. And that's the language I've used to describe it until very recently on another Iona pilgrimage just a few weeks ago. One of the pilgrims had asked me to talk about my journey of relinquishing ordination. And when I finished speaking, she said, excuse me, she said, "Oh, you gave your ordination back." And I think that's a good way of putting it. It didn't fit anymore, and it was important for me to give it back. And since then, one of the things that I've been particularly aware of, and I should say that the decision to renounce my ordination was in no sense a loss of faith. It was me following my faith. And since then, I've been especially aware of a tension, the creative tension that we find in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And it's right there in our scriptures as well. And that is a tension between the temple, as it were, and the wilderness, or a tension, creative tension between the priestly, sort of working within the four walls of religion, and the wilderness, and the prophet, the prophetic voice. So that's where I am now. I'm much more emphatically in the wilderness, trying to lend my voice to a prophetic call for change. And the other thing I've realized, and it's been really important for me personally, and that is that the prophetic voice is I think not a true voice if it's just sort of sounding off in the wilderness, sounding off critically. I think that the true prophetic voice has to be rooted in love, including a love for the family within the temple, because that's my family. That's where I come from, and I will always be a grateful son of the Christian household. So even though I'm very much in the wilderness now, and in the wilderness with millions of our brothers and sisters who began life within the four walls of the church, millions of them are no longer there. So that leads, to the new book to ask, well, what are we yearning for? What are the great yearnings of the human soul today? So that's my journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can relate to a lot of what you said. I've often referred to my leaving the church as exactly what you just described as wilderness. I had a question though, because this is where I'm struggling right now, and struggling is probably not the right word, but just kind of what I'm trying to wrestle with a bit. There is this implication that when you speak of being in the wilderness, that it's temporary, like it's a transitory thing, like we've left Egypt and now we're in the desert, but we're heading somewhere. I don't know about you, but I like the wilderness. I don't really have any intention of going back inside. Do you find yourself more comfortable on the fringes in the wilderness with no desire to go back to something more formal, or do you see yourself as in a transitory stage?
Yeah, that's a great question. I certainly don't see myself as ever wanting to go back into the four walls of religion as we've known it. But I do see this as a time of transition. I think religion as we've known it is in a state of collapse. And it's in parts of the world, certainly in Scotland, it's in a state of seismic collapse. And some people, of course, bemoan that fact or lament that fact. That's not where I go. I much more want to say, well, what is trying to be born? What is the new thing that is trying to come forth? And I think that we don't quite know what that new thing is yet. I think that I love what Carl Jung says about the Easter story when he says the risen Christ does not appear where his body was laid. So the Easter mystery is about something that could not have been imagined happening. So and he makes a distinction between resurrection and resuscitation. And I'm certainly not interested in the resuscitation of Christianity as we have known it. And, it's not a matter of making Christianity great again. never, I mean, whether religiously or politically or nationally, it's never a matter of going back to something that was. It's trying to ask, what is the new thing that is trying to emerge? And so in the wilderness, I love aspects of the wilderness as well. I'm totally with you there. And I feel very free as a bird in the wilderness, to try to give expression to what is deep within the human soul. I don't feel accountable to any sort of set of doctrines or creeds. So I'm trying to be faithful to what I am hearing in myself and what I'm hearing in others. But I think that one of the yearnings that I'm aware of in myself, and I hear in many other people coming to Iona for pilgrimage weeks and people coming to our retreat contexts, I hear a degree of loneliness, or I hear a degree of longing for more community, longing to be with others, to enter into silence or into meditative practice, longing for others with whom to celebrate great gifts of life, the birth of a child, or a community with whom to mourn and really grieve at times of loss, a community with whom to work more intentionally for change in the world. And often at the end of a pilgrimage week, when we've gone very deep together and have been blessed by the spirit of Iona and linking into some of the themes of the Celtic lineage of wisdom, I often invite people to say one word at the end of a pilgrimage week together, and sometimes I find myself speaking the word foretaste, like I've tasted what it is to be in what feels like authentic community that is celebrating the sacredness of earth and celebrating what is deepest in every human being, the divine at the heart of all life. So I think that is part of what I would say about the wilderness, that I think we are moving towards to use biblical language, longing for a promised land, or longing for something new that we haven't yet known or haven't experienced.
I'm curious about how you're able to take the words that you've just spoken today and all these things that you've discovered and put them into practice. Like, what is living in this wilderness and experiencing the connectivity, the embodiedness of nature? What does that look like in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, a great question, a really important one. So a couple of things on that front. One is to speak sort of personally about my own life and practices. And then the other, maybe I could speak a little bit about my little sort of foundation, Earth and Soul, and what our vision is and what our practices are. So for me, when I wake up in the morning, and I like to wake up early, and preferably before the sun rises, although that's very possible in Scotland a lot of the year, but in the summer, the sun hardly sets at all. The sun goes down very, very late, sort of twilight at midnight, and then the birds are singing again at about 2:00 in the morning. So, midsummer, I'm not up before the sun rises. But I do love that transition time from darkness to light, and I think this is like a primal desire, I think, to be in connection with a transition moment like that and the setting of the sun similarly. But for me, when I wake up, one of the first things I think is, oh yeah, I get to have a half hour of meditation now. And that's pretty foundational to my whole day. And I think in the early days of discovering the beauty of silence and meditative prayer, I was tempted sometimes to think, I've got a lot on my plate today. I've got lots of, meetings. I've got lots of writing to do. Today I think, these other things are so important. I'm going to dispense with meditation or shorten it. And it became pretty clear to me early on that's counterproductive. If I neglect that spiritual practice first thing in the morning, then I'm only half there in the day. I'm only half accessing creativities and so on. So for me, that daily practice in the morning is pretty foundational to my approach to the day. And then, when I'm with others in a pilgrimage context or retreat context, to get to do that with other people is even more wonderful. Even if it is just to enter silence, even if there are no words spoken. I mean, normally when I'm giving shape to an early morning meditation, I do like some words to be spoken at the beginning and end, and I do like a little bit of chanting or intoning of words. But even if it's just for silence, to do it with others is so much richer, so much deeper. There's a qualitative difference, I think, to being in meditation with others rather than just on one's own. But I love it on my own when that is the context. So that's to speak about my own personal practice and belief that that's so important. And I should say that in relation to that morning meditation time, whenever possible, I do it in the context of sunrise, so facing the east, so that I can actually see the sun rising. And I feel blessed to be living in a place where that faces east, and I can see the sun rising. And my wife and I have recently acquired a house up in the eco-spiritual community of Findhorn in Scotland. So we're very much in transition there to there. We won't be in sort of official residence there until Christmas probably. But we have been spending an increasing amount of time up in the Findhorn community. And one of the things that happens there is morning meditation in a round amphitheater type structure that opens so the canopy of trees above us and being able to see the morning light. And that's great. So, whenever I'm there, that's where I am first thing in the morning, and a lot of silence, a lot of chanting. A lot of Taizé chanting, interestingly, even though it's not just a Christian spiritual community. It's a community that draws people from many different faith backgrounds. So there's that. And then in relation to the earth and soul work that I do, we have a very pronounced emphasis, not just on teaching, which tends to be, my part in retreats and pilgrimage, but the teaching should always lead into spiritual practice. It's like allowing the head to engage with teaching, but then in spiritual practice to be listening at a deeper level, and then to allow that accessing of wisdom and that allowing the wisdom to settle at a deeper level within us, to then translate that teaching and that spiritual practice into compassionate action. And I think if wisdom and spiritual practice doesn't flow out into compassionate action, then I have some questions about what's happening in the accessing of wisdom and prayer. I think they are meant to flow into very intentional actions of love for earth and for one another. the sort of pattern of my days and the pattern of what I get to do when I'm giving shape to times together on pilgrimage or retreat.
Yeah, that's great. I have a question, but it's kind of diverging a little bit from what we've been talking about. It's more about the book. I found it interesting that in the first 3 chapters of the book, you circle back to the story of the burning bush and this idea of God as I am, or always has been, or always will be. I was wondering what's the importance to you of that story and how you intertwined it within like those first 3 chapters.
Yeah, that's interesting that you observed that. It appears in those first 3 chapters. Well, it is the first story in Hebrew scripture of divine self-disclosure. So I think that's one of the really important or interesting aspects of it as well. And I think in the book I can't quite remember always what I've written, but I think in the book I quote my rabbi brother Nachum saying about that story of Moses encountering a bush that is on fire without being consumed. Rabbi Nachum likes to say about that story, the important thing about that story is not that the bush was burning, but that Moses noticed, because every bush is burning. The whole universe is a burning bush. The divine light at the heart of all things. And I think it's Martin Buber who said and who sort of opened my eyes to seeing how the Hebrew tradition approaches revelation. And that is an important story of divine self-disclosure like that. One of the things that Buber says is that the more important the story of revelation, the more deeply it is pointing to what is everywhere present. So it's not, the burning bush in that sense is not an exception to life, but rather is a disclosure of the burning light, the shining of the divine deep in all things. And I wish that we in our Christian tradition would have that approach to revelation, and to see Jesus not as an exception to humanity, but rather as a disclosure of the divine at the heart of every human being. And I think that this is one of the most pivotal questions before Christianity today. Will we allow our love of Jesus to lead us to look for that light, revere it, cherish it, honor it, protect it deep within every human being? Or will we continue to give the impression that the light that we love in Jesus is somehow an exception to life, or foreign to earth and foreign to what is deepest in every human being? So I think that Hebrew approach to revelation points to what is at the heart of all life, rather than being an exception to life. It is a really important one. And I think the other thing about that story that's so important is when Moses, says, I want to tell my people, who I've encountered here in the burning bush, what's your name? The response is not, I'm this or I'm that, I'm Lord, I'm Creator, I'm Savior, none of these words. The response is, I am who I am. I have been who I have been. I will be who I will be. In other words, don't try to name me. Don't try to tame me. Don't try to claim me as specifically, yours, or belonging to, one religion over another. And I think that this self-disclosure of the divine as beyond names is really important, not only for how we speak about the divine, but I think it's really important for how we speak about one another, and how I view you. I mean, there may be certain things that you like to say about yourself. That you are a man, that you're a brother, that you're a son. And other things that you might love to say about yourself. But always, it's important to remember that you are more than race. You are more than your particular family. You are of the one who is beyond names. That your essence cannot be defined. And the more we can see one another in those reverent terms, the more I think we will be on the path to true relationship.
And that to me seems to be where, if I was going to critique maybe modern evangelical Christianity, that's where that disconnect happens to me. It's this focus on exclusion. It's this focus on, I think I wrote something similar in the book I released last year that was saying that, they want to lay claim to Christ as theirs exclusively, as though they could. First of all, it's the height of arrogance to think you've got it right and that everybody else has it wrong. But what is your approach then when we start to talk about Christ universally? I think Richard Rohr did a really good job in his Universal Christ book of at least opening the door to thoughts of, maybe we've had this, maybe we've been going about this all wrong the entire time, where we're trying to box Jesus into something outside of his role as the Christ, which is a universal sort of model for the world. Does that make sense? I mean, am I making those connections correctly, do you think?
Yeah, I think that the invitation is to see Jesus as revealing or disclosing this Christhood that is deep within every human being. And by Christhood, I'm meaning this oneness of the divine and the human deep within us. And I mean, that's part of the language that we use coming out of a Christian tradition. But it's similar to how our Buddhist brothers and sisters will speak of Buddha nature. So they see the Buddha as revealing Buddha nature, and that is what we are to be looking for in one another. So I think the sort of Christian parallel to speaking about Buddha nature is to speak about Christhood, and by that I think we're talking about this marriage of the divine and the human that are right at the core of our being, that mingling of heaven and earth, of spirit and matter that is deep in all things. So I remember hearing the story of someone saying to a rabbi, what do you think of those words from John's Gospel? I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. And the rabbi said to the questioner, I agree with those words. And the questioner said, but how can you agree with those words? And, these words that have been so exclusivized, so used in such an exclusive way in so much Christian teaching. And the rabbi said, well, I believe that in Jesus we see the way. In Jesus we see the truth. In Jesus we see the life. And in Jesus we see that the way is love. The truth is love. And no one comes to the Father but through love. And so I think if we can, once again, I think sort of a part of a pattern of what we're talking about here is to allow a revelation story and a revelatory figure like Jesus to point not to an exception, but to allow him to be this disclosure of what is deep within us. And certainly in the Celtic world, it is often said that we have forgotten who we are, and Christ comes to as our memory, is one of the phrases. So we have forgotten who we are. We have forgotten our divine essence, and Jesus comes to waken us up. And in that sense, as our memory. And the other word that's used, certainly in the Celtic lineage of wisdom about Jesus, is he's spoken of as our revelation. And the word revelation, of course, comes from the Latin root revelare, which just means to lift the veil. So Jesus is seen as lifting the veil, not to show us a foreign truth, but to show us the deepest truth, the deepest truth of our being, that we're made of God. So I think that again for me is the critical issue of we were speaking about where we're going from the wilderness. Well, we're in the wilderness because we don't like the exclusivist stuff that's so often happening within the four walls. We're not being fed or nurtured in relation to deep yearnings. But certainly in terms of where we're going, I believe that we're being invited to go to a place that allows our love of the light in Jesus to be looking for that in one another and in all people, and serving that light. And I think if we don't do that, the church religion, the Christian religion as we've known it, will increasingly become an irrelevance to humanity and to Earth. And if it's becoming an irrelevance, it may just as well collapse. So it has no right to perpetuity, and it should only live and breathe if it's bringing blessing to the journey of Earth and humanity today.
Gosh, I love that. It's so good. It's so good. I keep thinking how, I'm a pastor. I'm a part of this whole church thing still. I still believe in it. But the church has long been a place where we go to for information we already agree with. And it's like, how can we know more information about things that we're going to nod our head towards? And I love what you're talking about, because it's kind of like that kingdom way of participating. It's reminding people of the Christ within. And if we follow Jesus, at least from my experience, if we follow Jesus, do the things that Jesus did, sometimes we will begin to remember who we are in the process. Like, we go out to the wilderness to pray. We hang out with people that are often marginalized. We feed the hungry. We throw parties. We go to parties. All those things that Jesus did can help remind us of our true identity, it seems.
Yeah.
What has it been like for you to be outside of the church context now, like the four-wall institutional thing? And do you feel like this Iona space that you're in, does it meet that need in you, or did you feel like that need was never really there in the first place?
Yeah, a couple of things in relation to that. I'm feeling, maybe for one of the first times in my life, I am feeling nourished by the experience of community in Findhorn, and I think that I get to see the sort of nurturing that community can be for pilgrims in our Iona context, and I feel very sort of fed in those contexts myself. Yes, it is work, and I'm teaching and so on. But it's a sort of good tiredness that I feel in that context, because I'm also receiving and being fed by others. So it's as you can imagine, there have been varied responses to me choosing to relinquish my ordination, and some people feel judged by it. I emphatically that is not why I took that decision. Many of my best friends continue to be ministers and priests, and I have great love for them. I admire what so many of them are doing, being faithful within the four walls and trying to work for change from within. As I was trying to say earlier, the wilderness and the temple are to be in creative tension, and some of us are working for change from outside, from the wilderness, and others are very importantly working for change from within. But as you can imagine, and just a little example, I had agreed to a speaking engagement in the United States before I relinquished my ordination. They invited me to come and speak. And then, when they discovered I had relinquished my ordination, they said, no, sorry. The priest in charge apparently said to one of my friends, he said, oh, he'll be telling people to leave the church. I mean, we're not going to have him here. And of course, that's not what I would be doing. I'm not calling anyone to leave the church. And the decision I took about my ordination was a decision of personal integrity. It was essential for me as a teacher to say there's a profound disconnect between what I'm trying to teach and point to, sacredness of earth and sacredness at the heart of every human being. There's a profound disconnect between that and the sort of foundational creedal statements within Western Christianity that occurred when Christianity got into bed with power in the 4th century. And that relationship has sort of continued over the centuries, because I'm not just speaking about the Roman Empire, I'm speaking about the British Empire, I'm speaking about the American Empire. Any nation that sets itself up, in a sense, over against the rest of the world and claims that it's all right to neglect the well-being of other nations or to exploit and wrong other nations, claims that it can go to war and get the blessing of the church. So, for me, as a teacher, it was really important to say, no, my foundation is not within the Christianity that was formed from that alliance between religion and power. And it's really important for me as a teacher to, in that sense, say that is not where I stand. And it's important for me to say no, but no to that historical development of Christianity from the 4th century, and to try to access some of the wisdom that was developing within Christian communities before the 4th century. And in particular, I'm accessing the sort of wisdom that we see in the Celtic Christian world from as early as the 1st century right through to the 7th century, when in the 7th century is when the Celtic Christianity was really declared to be heretical and to be rejected. And from that point onwards in the Celtic world, what we get are the monks who are forced to either conform to imperial Christianity or to get out. Those who get out, become known as wandering Celts or Scottish vagans. And so I sort of come in a long lineage. I'm a Scottish vagans. I'm a wandering Scot. And for me, it's important to stand in a lineage and to see that I'm not an original fount of wisdom. I'm trying to transmit some wisdom that has been spoken before us and try to speak it in new ways for today. So the reaction has been varied. Of course, I feel disappointed is not quite the right word. I think I also feel, hurt at times by some of the antagonism, because that's not my intention. I'm not intending to stand in judgment of those who, like yourself, very importantly, are continuing to try to follow your faith within ministry.
Yeah, that was some of the reaction that I got when I did leave, was exactly what you described, which was, stay away from that guy. He's going to tell you all to leave the church. And that's, I have no intention of saying that. I don't, I'm, it's none of my business, and that's really, what it came down to for me was we all make those choices, and I have friends inside the church. I have friends who are pastoring. I don't have anything but love and respect for all those people, whatever position you're comfortable. But you come from a long line of people who have given up their credentials. I think of John Dominic Crossan, leaving his order over an issue of integrity. I think of our friend Thomas Ord, who just got stripped of his ordination over issues of integrity, and he was willing to do it. At the end of the day, those credentials, if we lean into things like what the Apostle Paul said, they don't mean shit anyway. They're just titles, and it's just nomenclature, and it's less than useless in the kingdom anyway. So I think, we've made a lot of those titles and those things that we sometimes, and myself included, it was hard to give up that position. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And it was like, wait a minute, that might be the issue. It's mine. It never was supposed to be mine. So.
Yeah. I realized the other day when we finish retreats or finish pilgrimage weeks, we often have a very simple ritual of anointing. So we have a little bowl of olive oil with a bit of frankincense in it. And if people wish, they receive an anointing either on their palm or their forehead. And it has a sort of twofold focus. One is like a prayer that we may be well in body, mind, and spirit. And the other is that we may be strong for the work of healing in the world. And an utterly simple ritual. But it provides that moment. I feel so blessed to be the one involved in the anointing, because I get to look into the eyes of every retreatant or every pilgrim, and that feels a tremendous sort of privilege and honor to be engaged with someone in that type of moment. And one of the things that it does for me is it reminds me of what it was like standing, distributing the bread and the wine in the church. I have always so cherished that moment, because people often come with very open countenances, sometimes with tears, sometimes expressing this hunger to be nourished. And so, I miss things like that. Sometimes cathedral worship, a great sense of song and sort of richness of sound of instruments or organs, and these are things I miss. I miss being in that position, especially to do the one-on-one. But we're finding other rituals, and I think it's really important that we use our imagination and almost playfully discover, well, what are the rituals for this moment in time that we can use to really feed the soul. And they don't have to be the old rituals. There should never be seen as anything sort of fixed about needing to do it in a particular way, or needing to do the sacraments as they've done. These were rituals that came to birth well after Jesus, and so let's keep trying to go back to to reimagining the real essence of the encounter of Christhood in Jesus, and see how we serve that in nurturing the Christhood in one another.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think your book is going to do. It's a lot of. I think it's going to resonate with a lot of folks. I know John and Bethany and myself. We talk about this kind of stuff often. So I just want to make sure we end on reminding people the title of the book is The Great Search. This is John Philip Newell. It is available, I'm sure, wherever fine books are sold. Local bookstores first, please, people. We want to go there. But if you must give Jeff Bezos your money, I'm sure Amazon will have it as well. I'm sure it's available in Kindle and all those other nifty formats. But I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us. I've gotten a great deal out of it. I can tell from the looks on John and Bethany's faces they have gotten a lot out of it as well. But yeah, thank you so much.
Well, very good to be with you. And I would like to invite you all to Iona and come and see us there. You could even claim to be coming to do some work, and we could have a recorded dialogue there.
I'm in.
There you go.
I just renewed my passport. I am ready to go. I have dreamed of visiting Scotland my entire life, so let's make that a reality.
So have I.
Absolutely. Good luck with the book launch. I guess you're having the book launch in Atlanta.
Yeah, on Thursday, the 24th, I think it is, of October, and it's open to all who would like to come.
The best of luck on that. I hope it all goes very well. Hopefully, we can touch base with you again in the future and check up on you, see how things are going, or maybe we'll come see you in Scotland. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.